Welcome back, casual gardeners. We're in my kitchen again, and I know it's a scary place and we really want to be back out in the garden, but sometimes you just need to use what you've grown, and this is my new favorite way to use basil, because I know basil can be a problem. You grow it and then you have to keep picking it to keep it growing right, and then you're like, what do I do with this basil I just picked? One thing you can do is you can make sourdough bread, but I have another problem. I didn't start it soon enough. So my co-star, Michael Bubley, and I are going to go over a quick sourdough recipe. You can make sourdough in under a day with no special tools. The one measurement I ever do is measuring the water. For this, you're gonna want warm water. Like, it needs to feel warm when you touch it, but not hot. You need to be able to leave your finger in there without going, ow. This will accelerate the fermentation process a little bit because ain't nobody got time for that. The longer your sourdough ferments, the more sourdough flavor you're going to get. But that's not an issue here because we are going to be adding a bunch of herbs. So this was about 1 3/4 cups of water. That gives me 2 loaves. I'm gonna open up Michael. It's been about a little over a week since Michael last was fed. It's got a layer of hooch on him. He's looking pretty sad. He's not ready. Here we go. I'm just gonna jam a bunch of Michael in my bowl here. In fact, most of my sourdough starter is now in the bowl. How much of it? Most. Most is the measurement. That's what we're doing. Now I'm just going to stir Michael into the water so that he's nice and distributed. And I'm going to add some flour. How much flour? Some. Some is the measurement. The goal is to wind up with something with the texture of pancake batter. We want it to be very wet and just start fermenting a little bit early. And at this stage, the only thing I've got in here is flour and water. We will add some salt and some more flour later. All right, that's all mixed in. If you're gonna add any wheat flour, which I recommend because wheat flour will improve your flavor, add it at this point because wheat flour takes a little longer to hydrate and ain't nobody got time for that. So my texture is this. I'm gonna cover the bowl and it is time to walk away for at least 3 hours. You can do more hours if you want. I'm gonna do 3. It's time to clean up. So for the next step, I'm gonna need some basil, about that much. I'm gonna need some salt, about 2 teaspoons. I'm gonna need a couple cloves of garlic because it adds depth of flavor. And today I'm also gonna need some sun-dried tomatoes. You can skip the tomatoes and just do basil and garlic, or I sometimes like to add rosemary. You can add a little thyme. Throw whatever fresh herbs you've got in there that you just want to enjoy. We're gonna feed Michael and put him back in the fridge and ignore him. I'll see you in about 3 hours. Now, before I can move on to the next step in our baking process, I am gonna wanna collect my fresh herbs. I'm gonna wanna do that right before the next step. So I'm gonna have the freshest of fresh herbs. As I pick these, I'm taking flowers because you know what? You can eat flowers. And they're all gonna be ground up and hidden in the bread anyway. Nobody will know that I'm feeding them basil flowers. As I harvest my basil, I'm being careful to pick it in a way that encourages more and bushier growth. That's enough for now. So you might notice that this garlic bulb I'm using is a little bit small. It's one of the less exciting bulbs that I grew. I got some big, nice ones and I got some small ones like this. So since these little cloves are so little, I'm just going to use the rest, and that's fine. I just always like this giant knife. It is too big for these. So now I am just going to throw my garlic in the food processor. I'm going to throw my basil, washed, in the food processor. I'm going to take these sun-dried tomatoes, put some in the food processor. If you've got tomatoes that you've dried at home that aren't in oil, I think that's actually even better. I just want it to be small and chunky enough to incorporate somewhat into the bread. A little bit of heterogeneity is good though, so don't go crazy. Oh man, that smells like it would be really good by itself. So as I open this up, I notice that I've got bubbles. When you see the bubbles, you know that even though you didn't do what all the sourdough channels ask you to do and like prepare your dough, it's still working. All right, now I'm going to dump all this in at this stage because right now my dough is very, well, it's a batter, and that makes it easier to mix things into it. Later, it will be a proper dough and incorporating things will be a lot harder, so I don't want to miss that boat. I'm going to need a lot more flour. And there's also the point where we're adding our salt. About 2 teaspoons. There we go. You can't make bread without getting your hands dirty, but I like to put it off a minute. All right, now my friends, you can see it's all pretty mixed in, and I'm not measuring, I'm just adding some flour. Let's work that in. If you are all het up about measurements, you can do that too. You'll have to use someone else's recipe though, because I don't have one. I'm just going to keep adding flour until it won't take any more flour. Sorry. See, it's starting to act a little bit doughier now. That's a good sign. I'm going to wet my fingers to take the flour off my spoon because that makes it stick a little bit less. Now I'm going to throw some more flour in. It's gotten to a point where I don't like doing it with a spoon anymore, so I'm going to use my hand and keep going. The mixing is the kneading. This is all the kneading I'm going to do. Just getting the flour into my dough until I have a workable dough. Now as I do this, I am feeling the texture of my dough change. I can feel it getting smoother and more consistent throughout. I can see that the bits of the dough in the bowl are sticking to it a little bit better. That looks good. My hand is all messy and that's okay. I'm going to rinse it off. This is going to rest for 15 minutes, and then for the next hour we're committed. Every 10 to 15 minutes we got to do stuff, and then it gets easy again. Thanks to the magic of videography, it's been 15 minutes. I have wet my hands so they don't stick to the dough. I'm going to lift some up and pull it out and fold it over. Quarter turn, I'm going to do that again. Quarter turn, do that again. Quarter turn, do that again. This is very wet, shaggy dough because that's just how I like it. This step is done. I'm going to wait 15 more minutes. Here's our second time pulling the dough. Each time I pull the dough, I notice that it gets a little bit firmer and a little bit more cohesive, which is why I don't skip this step. There's stuff that I keep and stuff that I discard. And I try to make sure I'm keeping the stuff that works. See you in 15 minutes. Number 3, same thing as I do this. I feel that my dough is getting smoother and easier to work with, which is good. All right, one more time after this and we can move on. This is going to be the last pull, and then after this, I'm going to let it rest for 15 minutes so that its little glutens can calm the heck down, and we'll shape our loaves and let them rise. See you in 15 minutes. All right, now that my dough has had a chance to relax again, I am going to turn it out onto my countertop. And of course, first I'm gonna spread a little flour around, just so it doesn't get too sticky. The reason I've been keeping this dough covered is that you don't want it to dry out while it's resting and develop a little weird crust. So that's, in case you were wondering. Right now I could rip this in half with my hands, but since I have one, I'm going to use this and get 2 nice separate loaves. Sprinkle my tops with some flour. Just make something bread shaped a little bit. I like elongated loaves, so we're gonna kind of pull it out into the shape I want. And slap it down on a clean, dry cookie sheet. I'm not gonna use a Dutch oven for this because I don't own one. This isn't only a microwave. This is my bread riser. And I'm going to set this bowl of hot water next to them. That's going to increase the temperature and humidity. And I just close the door. And I'm going to let them sit in the microwave until they've about doubled in size. The dough has doubled in size. It looks a little flat, and that's okay, because we're not hobby bakers. We're baking for food. I'm going to use this water in a moment. Off screen, I preheated the oven to 450 degrees, and I have my sacrificial cookie sheet in the oven. You'll see what I mean. You're going to want to preheat your oven with some sort of oven-safe container that can handle heat shock. So I use a metal cookie sheet, because if you use like a glass cooking dish and you pour room temperature water in that thing, it's gonna explode and you're not gonna have bread. Use something you don't care about, because it will become hideously distorted. Now, before I can put these in the oven, I need to slit them. Use a very sharp knife or a razor blade. Now, these slits are going to provide somewhere for the pressure from the oven spring to go. Before I put my bread in the oven, I'm going to want to increase the humidity in the oven. That's going to create a steaming environment so that the skin of the bread doesn't harden too fast while it's baking. I'm going to get better oven spring and a nice rounder loaf. I'm going to bake at 450 degrees for 15 minutes. 15 minutes is not enough time to fully bake the bread. Now I'm going to want to turn the temperature down to about 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to want to remove the tray of water. I want it to cook dry now. That'll help give me a nice crunch on the crust. I'm just going to let this cook until I think it's a pretty color for bread. That's my whole way I figure out my bread is done cooking. I think my oven cooks hot because it's already done. This is some good looking bread. The bread's not done, but our work is. The hardest part of this whole process is allowing the bread time to finish cooking. Because when we take it out of the oven, it's not done yet. So give it at least an hour or two before you cut into it. Thank you for joining me in my kitchen today. Hope you have a wonderful time in your own.